1940, and Donald inherited the company when he was about 20. His father had passed, he had to step up and take over the business. And Donald had been to school for beer making, which is what they were doing at the time. They were making beer. 3 generations of the family had been brewmasters. And Donald started out as brewmaster, and then he branched the company out. He and a buddy from school bought a mineral water spring, and they started bottling mineral water in right around, I think, 59 or 60, so early. And they were very successful with the water company. They ran it for 34 years, and then they sold the Valser Mineral Water Company to Coca-Cola in 2003. So we are fairly sure they did okay with water. So, but Donald came to the U.S. looking to expand the water company. They were looking for a spring here in the U.S., and he landed in New York, and he said, I wasn't even on the ground for an hour or more to figure out that there was really no market for bottled water in the U.S. in 1976. So they traveled anyway because they'd set up appointments all across the United States. And he said they weren't finding water they were really interested in. He said everything was a little bitter and a little salty. And he said there was still no market to sell it in. So by the time they reached California, they're just fairly sure this is not going to work. And so he said they went to their last spring, which was the Calistoga Mineral Water Company. They did not like the water there at all. And he said once we crossed them off the list, we were concerned about having to go home and tell everyone at home that they had failed in their 4.5-week mission to California, to the United States. And he said, I went to dinner that night to figure out how we were going to make coming home with nothing sound better than it really was. So they sat down to their food, and the server brought them the wine list. And he said, we opened this wine list up and found nothing but California wine. They knew absolutely nothing about California wine. It was 1976. The judgment had just happened. Donald had read about it in the paper, and so he challenged the server to teach him something about California wine. He said, maybe we're looking for the wrong thing. So the server poured them 1970 Georges Latour from BV and the 73 Chateau Montelena Chardonnay, which obviously had just come back from a win in Paris. And they were very impressed with the wines, and he said very quickly decided that the approach to this was going to be to go home and tell everyone we had a better plan than water, that wine may be the thing we want to do in California. So they came back in 1978, and they started buying land on the ridge right across from us here. They bought about 400 acres of property, and they started farming. They did nothing but farm for the first few years, and then we made our first wine in 1983 in rented space up valley somewhere. The success of the 83 cab launched the idea of building a winery. So we started searching the property for a place to build, and what we found was that the access is very poor at the top of the mountain. It's very steep, very hard to reach, and there is no water supply. So without a really reasonable spot to build in, they said looking across the canyon, this building's already here. It's been here a lot longer than us. It was a winery from the day it was built, and it was conveniently empty at the time that we were looking for a home. So they came over looking to find out who owned the building and did they want to sell it, rent it, lease it. And we wound up with a long-term lease on the building.